The snow buried the sound of my breathing as I pounded on the door with bare hands. My stepfather stood behind the glass, looking at me like a stranger. He lifted his phone not to call for help, but to engage the smart lock. As my fingers went numb, I saw something colder than the ice. A black car sat down the street with a camera rolling, as if someone had been waiting for this exact moment. My name is Elena Patterson, and at 37 years old, I found myself freezing to death on the porch of the house I grew up in. The cold in Hollow Creek, Colorado, does not just touch you, it invades. It is a physical weight, pressing against your chest until your lungs refuse to expand. The air temperature was -8 degrees, but with the wind chill cutting through the valley, it felt like the atmosphere itself was trying to erase me. I pounded my fist against the solid oak door. My knuckles were already raw, the skin split and bleeding, leaving small, dark smears on the white paint. The wood did not budge. The sound of my desperate knocking was swallowed instantly by the heavy blanket of snow falling around me. It was a silence so profound it felt violent. Through the narrow pane of reinforced glass that ran alongside the doorframe, I could see him. Curtis Vale stood in the hallway. The warm, yellow light of the foyer chandelier cast his shadow long against the hardwood floor. He was wearing his favorite beige cashmere cardigan, the one my mother had bought him for Christmas 2 years ago. He held a tumbler of amber liquid, likely the expensive bourbon he kept on the top shelf, swirling it gently. He looked calm. He looked like a man pondering a painting in a museum, not a man watching his stepdaughter die on his doorstep. I screamed his name, but the wind tore the sound from my throat before it could reach him. He did not flinch. He simply raised his smartphone with his free hand. He was not calling for help. He was not checking the weather. I heard the mechanical whir of the smart lock engaging. Beep, whir, click. The deadlock slid home. I heard it. I felt the vibration of it through the wood. He was not just locking the door. He was engaging the deadlock mode via the app, the kind that overrides the keypad outside. He was sealing the tomb. I looked at him, my eyes wide, begging for this to be a mistake. Curtis looked back. His expression was devoid of anger. There was no rage, no heated argument that had led to this. There was only a terrifying, bureaucratic indifference. It was the look of a man who had calculated the odds, weighed the risks, and decided that my existence was an accounting error he was finally correcting. He took a sip of his bourbon, turned his back to the glass, and walked calmly toward the living room. The porch light clicked off. Darkness rushed in. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely unzip my purse. I needed my phone. I needed to call 911. My fingers felt like clumsy sausages, lacking sensation or dexterity. I fumbled with the zipper, panic rising in my throat like bile. When I finally gripped the device, the metal casing burned my skin with its coldness. 7% battery. Lithium-ion batteries surrender quickly in extreme cold. I watched the number drop to 6% as the screen woke up. I tried to unlock it, but my Face ID failed in the low light, and my frozen thumbs kept hitting the wrong numbers on the passcode. 1147. It was 11:47 at night. I finally bypassed the lock screen and tapped the emergency call button. The signal bars in the top corner flickered. 1 bar, then searching, then 1 bar again. Hollow Creek was notorious for dead zones during storms, and Curtis knew that. He knew everything about the infrastructure of this valley. I pressed the call button. The phone was silent against my ear. No ring. Just the hollow static of a failed connection. Call failed. I tried again. Call failed. 5% battery. I could not waste the remaining power on a voice call that would not connect. I opened my messaging app. My vision was starting to blur, the edges of my sight darkening as the cold slowed my blood flow. I found the thread for Mara, my best friend back in Denver. I could not type a full explanation. My thumbs were stiff, refusing to bend. I forced them to move, typing out a message that looked more like a ransom note than a plea for help. If I die, look at Curtis. Sent. The delivery bubble spun. It spun for what felt like hours. Then, miraculously, it turned blue. Delivered. 4%. I shoved the phone deep into my coat pocket, trying to preserve whatever heat was left in the device. I needed to move. Standing still was a death sentence. I looked up at the security camera mounted above the garage door. It was a high-end model, one of those expensive systems Curtis had installed 6 months ago, boasting about its motion tracking and night vision. It was facing the wall. Someone had physically rotated the housing. The lens was staring blankly at the vinyl siding of the house, capturing nothing but white texture. A chill that had nothing to do with the snow ran down my spine. This was not a malfunction. This was not a drunken mistake or a moment of heated passion. Curtis had rotated that camera. He had waited for the storm. He had waited for me to step outside to check the circuit breaker he claimed had tripped. He was not just scaring me. He was manufacturing a tragedy. I could see the headline in the local paper tomorrow. Tragedy in Hollow Creek, grieving stepdaughter. Freezes in drunken accident. He would play the devastated father figure. He would say I came over late, intoxicated, distraught over my mother's death. He would say I must have slipped on the ice, hit my head, or passed out. He would say the smart lock must have malfunctioned, or that I had forgotten the code in my confused state. He would have the perfect alibi he was inside, asleep, or perhaps listening to music with noise-canceling headphones. The rotated camera would be dismissed as wind damage. The lock logs would be deleted or explained away as a glitch. I was not a person to him anymore. I was a loose end in a trust fund ledger. I stumbled toward the railing, my boots sliding on the accumulating drifts. I needed to get to the neighbor's house. The Millers lived a quarter of a mile down the road, in normal weather. It was a 5-minute walk. In this blizzard, with the snow up to my calves and the wind screaming, it might as well have been a marathon. I gripped the frozen wood of the railing to steady myself. My legs felt heavy, like they were filled with wet sand. I looked out toward the street, trying to find the line where the driveway met the road. That was when I saw it. At the very end of the street, parked under the heavy canopy of an old spruce tree, sat a black SUV. It was almost invisible against the dark night, but the snow had piled on its roof, outlining its shape. The engine was running. I could see the faint, rhythmic puff of exhaust vapor rising into the storm. It was idling. Who sits in a car at the end of a cul-de-sac in the middle of a blizzard at midnight? I squinted against the stinging snowflakes. Inside the vehicle, there was a faint glow. It was the distinct, cool blue light of a dashboard monitor or a laptop screen. Someone was watching. For a second, I thought it was an accomplice. Had Curtis hired someone? But that made no sense. Curtis was a control freak. He did not outsource his dirty work. He automated it. He used laws, paperwork, and technology. He would not trust a human accomplice. The person in that car was not with Curtis. The windshield wipers of the SUV swiped once, clearing a layer of snow, then stopped. A camera lens, large and professional, glinted briefly in the reflection of the street lamp. They were filming. I did not know if they were filming the house or if they were filming me, but they were there. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I was center stage in a play I did not know was being written. My knees gave way, and I slid down the railing, landing hard on the decking. The pain was dull, distant. My body was prioritizing survival over pain reception. As I huddled there, trying to shield my face from the wind, the present moment shattered, and a sharp shard of memory cut through the fog in my brain. 6 weeks ago, the smell of lilies and old carpet, the heavy, suffocating atmosphere of the funeral home. My mother, Marianne Patterson, lay in the casket at the front of the room. She looked small. The cancer had eaten away everything that made her vibrant, leaving only a shell that the morticians had painted with too much blush. I stood by the entrance, feeling like an intruder in my own grief. I was wearing a black dress that felt too tight, holding a program I had not read. "She looks peaceful, doesn't she?" The voice had come from behind me. Smooth, cultured, practiced. I turned to see Curtis. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my car. His eyes were red-rimmed, but his skin was dry. He looked the part of the grieving widower perfectly. He reached out and squeezed my shoulder. His hand was warm, heavy, and possessed a squeeze that lasted 2 seconds too long. It was not a touch of comfort. It was a touch of ownership. "She's gone. Curtis," I had said, pulling away slightly. "Peaceful is just a word we use to make ourselves feel better." He smiled, a sad, patient smile that made me want to scream. "You are so like her, Elena, always so sharp, always looking for the fight." He stepped past me, walking toward the casket. He did not look at my mother's face. His eyes went lower. He was looking at the arrangement of flowers, at the guests filing in, and then, for a brief second, his gaze darted to the side table where the legal documents regarding the estate transfer were sitting in a folder for the attorney. It was a look of hunger, not sexual hunger, but the hunger of a predator spotting a wounded animal. It was the look of a man counting his winnings before the game had officially ended. I remembered the last coherent thing my mother had said to me. 3 days before she slipped into the coma, she had grabbed my wrist with surprising strength, pulling me down close to her pillow. Her breath smelled of antiseptic and decay. "Elena," she had whispered, her eyes wide and lucid for the first time in weeks. "The keys, the digital ones, he changed them." "Who, Mom Curtis?" I asked gently, thinking she was hallucinating. "Don't trust the keeper of the keys," she hissed. "He locks things to keep them, not to protect them." At the time, I thought she was talking about the safety deposit box or the house keys. I thought it was the morphine talking. Now, sitting on the frozen porch with the temperature dropping and my blood turning to slush, I understood. She wasn't speaking in metaphors. She was warning me about the very nature of the man she had married. Curtis Vale did not use violence. He used access. He controlled the passwords, the codes, the accounts, and the doors. He didn't need to hit you. He just needed to revoke your credentials to your own life. Back in the present, the wind howled, snapping me out of the memory. The cold was gnawing at my bones now. I could not feel my toes. I looked back at the house. The window was dark. He assumed I was already unconscious, or perhaps he had gone to bed to establish his timeline of sleep. I looked back at the street. The black SUV was still there. The blue light inside was steady. A strange, cold clarity washed over me. It was sharper than the ice. If I died here, Curtis would win. He would get the house, the trust, the insurance, and the sympathy of the entire town. I would just be the tragic, unstable stepdaughter who couldn't handle her grief. No. I forced myself to stand. My legs screamed in protest. I grabbed the railing and hauled myself up. I would not die on this porch. I would not give him that satisfaction. I looked at the black car again. I did not know who was inside that vehicle. I did not know if they were a friend or a foe. I did not know if they were saving the footage to help me or to blackmail Curtis. But as I began the agonizing trek through the snow toward the neighbor's house, dragging my frozen limbs one by one, a single thought burned bright enough to keep my heart beating. I do not know who is in that black car, watching this crime unfold. But I know one thing for certain Curtis Vale does not know either. To understand how I ended up freezing on that porch, you have to understand the 18 years that came before it. You have to understand that violence does not always look like a raised fist. Sometimes, violence looks like a spreadsheet. Sometimes, it looks like a man calmly explaining why your perception of reality is statistically incorrect. Curtis Vale entered my life when I was 19 years old. I was a sophomore in college, old enough to live on my own, but young enough to still need a place to crash during the holidays. My father had passed away when I was 10, and my mother, Mary Ann, had spent nearly a decade keeping our heads above water. She was tired. I see that now. She was exhausted from being the captain, the navigator, and the crew of our sinking ship. Then came Curtis. He did not sweep her off her feet with romance or grand gestures. He seduced her with stability. He was a project manager for a mid-sized logistics firm, a man who wore pleated khakis and drove a sedan that was washed every Sunday afternoon. He brought with him a sense of order that our chaotic, artistic household lacked. When he moved in, he did not try to be my father. He made that very clear. He sat me down at the kitchen table, A coaster slid precisely under his water glass and told me he wanted to be a mentor, a guide. That was the first lie. Curtis did not want to guide. He wanted to audit. The takeover was so slow that if you blinked, you missed it. It started with the family optimization, as he called it. He convinced my mother that her method of paying bills, writing checks when they arrived, was inefficient. He set up autopay. He consolidated accounts. He created a master file for all household expenses. My mother was relieved. She joked that she finally had a CFO for the business of living. She handed over her checkbook, her passwords, and her financial anxiety. She thought she was gaining freedom. She did not realize she was handing over her autonomy. For me, the control was different. It was a branding campaign. Curtis decided early on that my role in the family narrative was that of the impulsive child. It did not matter that I made the dean's list. It did not matter that I worked 2 jobs to pay for my textbooks. If I bought a coffee on a Tuesday, Curtis would raise an eyebrow and ask if that fit into my long-term liquidity goals. If I voiced an opinion about politics or a movie, he would chuckle, a dry, dusty sound, and say, "There goes Elena again, leading with her heart instead of her head. So emotional." He never yelled. He never called me names. He just constantly, gently, relentlessly invalidated my judgment. He painted a picture of me as a chaotic, unstable mess that needed to be managed, and the worst part was that he said it so calmly, with such faux concern, that my mother began to believe him. "Maybe you should listen to Curtis, honey," she would say when I complained about his interference. "He just wants you to be secure. You know how you get with money. You're a bit free-spirited." I was not free-spirited. I was 22 and buying a used Honda Civic with my own savings. But Curtis found a scratch on the bumper and a discrepancy in the mileage report, and suddenly, my purchase was proof of my recklessness. By the time I was 25, I realized I could not breathe in that house. The air had changed. It was sterile, recycled, and controlled by a thermostat only Curtis was allowed to touch. I moved to Denver. I needed distance. I needed to prove, mostly to myself, that I was not the disaster he claimed I was. I landed a job at Cobalt Ridge Compliance Solutions. It was ironic, really. I became a compliance officer. My entire career was built on auditing systems, finding regulatory gaps, and ensuring that corporations followed the rules. I was good at it. I was disciplined. I was meticulous. I was the opposite of impulsive. I rose through the ranks quickly. I bought my own condo in the city. I built a life of sharp edges and clear boundaries. But every time I returned to Hollow Creek for a holiday or a birthday, I reverted. I would walk through that front door, and Curtis would be there, standing in the foyer like a toll booth operator. "Shoes on the mat, Elena," he would say, before even saying hello. "We just had the floors refinished. Let's try to keep the chaos outside." Chaos. That was his word for me. The house changed over the years. My mother's touches, the messy bookshelves, the mismatched throw pillows, the collection of ceramic frogs slowly vanished. They were replaced by beige furniture, minimal art, and empty surfaces. "It is much easier to clean," Curtis told me during a Thanksgiving visit 3 years ago. "Efficiency, order. The house has a system now." I looked at my mother. She was sitting in the armchair, staring out the window. She looked faded. She had stopped painting. She had stopped volunteering at the library. She just existed in the space Curtis had curated for her. "Mom, are you okay?" I had asked her later, in the kitchen. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, you know me, Elena. I'm just getting old. Curtis takes such good care of everything. I don't have to worry about a thing." But there were signs. As a compliance officer, my brain is trained to spot anomalies, and the anomalies in the Vale household were starting to pile up. I noticed the mail first. On the rare occasions I was left alone in the kitchen, I saw the stack of envelopes on the counter, bank statements, investment reports, tax documents. None of them were opened. My mother used to be obsessive about opening mail the day it arrived. "Curtis handles the filing on Sundays," Mom said when I asked. He prefers to do it in batches. Then there was the insurance. 2 years ago, I received a notification from my own insurance provider about a bundle discount, and it reminded me to ask Mom about hers. I found an old policy document in the junk drawer. The beneficiary address had been blacked out with a marker and a new sticker placed over it. The address wasn't the house. It was a P.O. box in a town 30 miles away. When I brought it up, Curtis laughed it off. Privacy, Elena. In this digital age, you don't want your home address floating around on every database. It is a security measure. You of all people should understand data protection. It sounded reasonable. Everything he said always sounded reasonable. That was his weapon. He weaponized logic to hide intent. Then came the safe. Curtis converted the guest bedroom into his home office. He installed a solid core door and a keypad lock. Inside, he bought a massive, fireproof gun safe, though he did not own any guns. For the deeds, he said. Passports, the trust documents, sentimental jewelry. We can't be too careful. My mother did not know the combination. I would only forget it, she laughed nervously. Curtis has it written down somewhere safe. Then, 6 months ago, the diagnosis came. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, aggressive, the timeline accelerated. Curtis shifted from manager to warden. He took a leave of absence from his job to become her full-time caregiver. To the outside world, he was a saint. The neighbors brought casseroles and praised his devotion. He cleans her sheets twice a day, Mrs. Miller told me. He manages all her meds. You are so lucky she has him. I tried to be there. I drove down from Denver every weekend. I tried to sit with her, to talk to her. But Curtis was always there, hovering, adjusting the blinds, checking her fluids, interrupting conversations to measure her blood pressure. She needs rest, Elena, he would whisper, ushering me out of the room after 10 minutes. She gets agitated when you are here. Your energy, it is a lot for her right now. He was rewriting reality again. He was making me the stressor, and himself the savior. The breaking point happened 3 weeks before she died. I met them at the oncologist's office. I wanted to hear the prognosis directly from the doctor. I wanted to know if there were trials, if there was anything we were missing. When the nurse called Marianne Patterson, I stood up. Curtis stood up faster. He placed a hand on my chest, not a shove, but a firm, stopping block. Family only for the consultation. Elena, he said. I am her daughter, I snapped, my voice rising in the quiet waiting room. And I am her husband and her medical proxy, he said, his voice terrifyingly level. Marianne is confused today. Having you in there asking a million questions will only upset her. It is better if you wait here, for her sake. He looked at the nurse. The nurse looked at me, then at the man in the sensible sweater holding the clipboard with all the insurance cards. She gave me a sympathetic, apologetic shrug. The system prefers order. And Curtis was the picture of order. I watched the door close. I sat in that waiting room for 40 minutes, staring at a magazine I didn't read, realizing that I had been completely erased from the decision-making process of my mother's life when they came out. My mother looked groggy. Curtis looked solemn. What did he say? I asked. We are managing pain now, Curtis said. That is the priority. No more invasive tests. We are going home. I tried to argue. I tried to suggest a second opinion. Curtis simply walked my mother to the car, buckled her in, and drove away, leaving me standing in the parking lot. I went back to Denver that night feeling a sense of dread that sat heavy in my stomach. I called every day, half the time. Curtis didn't answer. When he did, the calls were short. She is sleeping. She is having a bad day. She doesn't recognize anyone right now. I was planning to drive down on a Tuesday morning, to force my way in if I had to. I had packed a bag. I was ready to cause a scene, to finally embrace the impulsive label he had given me and use it to break down his walls. My phone buzzed at 6:14 in the morning. It was a text message from Curtis. No call, no voice, Just gray text on a white screen. Mom passed peacefully at 4 a.m. I have already called the funeral home. Don't come down yet. I have a lot of paperwork to handle. Don't complicate things. Everything is under control. I will handle it. I stared at the screen. Don't complicate things. He announced my mother's death with the same tone one would use to cancel a subscription. I sat on the edge of my bed, the morning sun of Denver hitting my face, but I felt cold. I realized then that to Curtis, my mother's death wasn't a tragedy. It was the closing of a file. The project was complete, and as I looked at that text, a new, horrifying thought took root in my mind. If the project was complete, what was he going to do with the only remaining liability? He told me to let him handle it. He told me not to come. I grabbed my keys and was on the highway in 20 minutes. I did not know it then, but I was driving straight into a trap he had been setting for 18 years. The funeral reception was held in the house my mother had paid for. On the furniture she had upholstered, surrounded by people who were eating her favorite honey-glazed ham while barely speaking her name. The air in the living room was thick and stagnant, smelling of cheap cologne and the cloying scent of the lilies that were beginning to droop in the overheated room. Curtis sat in my mother's wingback chair. He held a glass of mineral water, looking for all the world like a depleted saint. Every few minutes, a neighbor would approach him, touch his shoulder, and whisper something about his strength. He would nod, dab his dry eyes with a pristine handkerchief, and sigh. He was performing grief, and the audience was eating it up. I stood in the corner near the bookshelf, holding a paper plate I had no intention of using. I felt like a ghost at my own mother's wake. The isolation was physical. When I tried to join a conversation with Mrs. Gable from next door and the pastor, the talk withered instantly. They gave me tight, pitying smiles and drifted away toward the kitchen. They knew. Or rather, they thought they knew. Curtis had been planting seeds for months. Elena is unstable. Elena is money-hungry. Elena is barely around. An hour into the wake, the crowd began to thin. Curtis stood up, brushed a crumb from his black trousers, and signaled to me. It was a small gesture, a crook of the finger that summoned me like a wayward dog. "Elena," he said, his voice low and intimate. "Let's go to the study. We should talk about the logistics while things are quiet. I know you want to get back to your city life as soon as possible." He made my life in Denver sound like a drug addiction rather than a career. I followed him into the study. This was the room with the keypad lock, the room where the new safe sat in the corner like a brooding iron beast. Curtis sat behind the mahogany desk. He did not offer me a chair. "I wanted to spare you the headache of the legal proceedings," Curtis began, clasping his hands on the desk blotter. "I know how busy you are at Cobalt Ridge. Compliance work is demanding. Isn't it very tedious?" "I can handle paperwork, Curtis," I said, keeping my voice level. "What is the status of the will?" He sighed, a long, tragic exhalation. "That is the difficult part. We looked everywhere. I checked the safe, the bank box, her filing cabinets. There is no will. Elena. Marianne meant to write one, I'm sure, but with the sickness she just ran out of time." My stomach tightened. "That is not true. Mom told me 2 years ago she set up a living trust. She was specific about it. She said she wanted to make sure the house and her grandmother's jewelry were protected." Curtis laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a sound that he quickly smothered into a chuckle. "Oh, Elena, you always did have a vivid imagination. A trust that is for millionaires and people on television. Your mother and I were simple people. We didn't need complicated legal structures." "She told me—" "Curtis," I insisted, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "She said she met with a lawyer in Boulder. She was on a lot of medication toward the end," Curtis said softly. His tone was patronizing, dripping with fake sympathy. "Opioids can cause confusion, false memories. She probably watched a movie and got confused. It happens. The reality is, without a will, the state laws of intestacy apply. As the surviving spouse, the assets naturally transfer to me. It is standard procedure." He opened a drawer and slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. It was crisp, white, and innocent-looking. "However," he continued, "I want to be fair. I know there are sentimental items you might want. Photo albums, her old coat, maybe some of the costume jewelry. I had my attorney draft this simple acknowledgement. It just lists the items you take, so we have a record. You sign this, take what you want from the closet, and we can close this chapter. No courts, no fees, just family resolving things." I looked down at the paper. It was titled, "Receipt of Personal Property." My eyes scanned the text. My training at Cobalt Ridge kicked in instantly. I didn't read the list of items. I read the clauses at the bottom. The font was smaller there. "Signatory agrees that this receipt constitutes a full and final settlement of any and all claims against the estate of Marianne Patterson, waives all rights to contest the distribution of assets, agrees to hold the administrator harmless." It wasn't a receipt. It was a waiver. If I signed this to take a photo album, I was legally agreeing that I had no claim to the house, the savings, or the life insurance. "I am not signing this," I said, pushing the paper back. Curtis's face did not change, but his eyes went flat. "You are making this difficult. Elena, I am trying to be generous. I am trying to let you have memories. I don't want a coat. Curtis, I want to know where my mother's assets are going. I want to see the financials." "You have no right to see my financials," he snapped. The mask slipped for a fraction of a second. "This is a marital estate. You are an adult stepchild. You have no standing unless you want to drag your mother's name through the mud in probate court. Is that what you want? To air her dirty laundry? To make everyone think her daughter is a vulture? I am not a vulture. I am her daughter." "Then act like one," he said, standing up. "Respect her husband. Respect her choices." I walked out of the study before I screamed. My hands were shaking. I needed air. I grabbed my coat and went out to my car parked in the driveway. The winter wind bit at my face, but it felt cleaner than the air inside that house. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I hadn't used in years. Arthur Sterling. He was an old-school attorney in town, the man who had handled my father's estate years ago. I dialed. It rang 4 times. "Law office?" a gruff voice answered. "Mr. Sterling? This is Elena Patterson, Marianne's daughter." There was a pause. A heavy silence hung on the line. "Elena," he said. His voice was guarded. "I was sorry to hear about your mother. I saw the notice in the paper. Mr. Sterling, I need to know, did you ever draft a trust for her? Or a will?" "Curtis says there is nothing." Another pause. I could hear the rustle of papers in the background. Or maybe he was just shifting in his chair. "Elena," he said slowly, choosing his words with agonizing care, "I cannot discuss client matters over the phone, especially not when there is a complicated situation regarding representation." "Complicated how?" I pressed. "Did she hire you or not?" "There are things," he said, his voice dropping an octave, "that I cannot say on an insecure line, and there are files that were transferred. If you want to talk, you need to come to my office, but not this week. I am currently dealing with an audit of my own files. Call me next Monday." He hung up before I could ask another question. Files that were transferred. That was not a no. That was a yes, wrapped in fear. I sat in the car, staring at the dashboard. My phone buzzed. A notification from Facebook. I opened the app. Curtis had just posted a photo. It was a picture of my mother looking out at the garden, taken perhaps a year ago. She looked frail but peaceful. The caption read, "My beautiful Marianne always said she hated noise and conflict. She just wanted peace for our family." It breaks my heart that some people cannot respect her dying wish for simplicity and love. Greed is a terrible thing to witness in a time of mourning. Please pray for our family's healing and for those who have lost their way. The comments were already pouring in. "So sorry you have to deal with this. Curtis, some people have no shame. Stay strong. Curtis, she loved you so much. He wasn't just stealing the money. He was stealing the narrative. He was isolating me. turning the entire town of Hollow Creek into a jury that had already convicted me of being a gold digger. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. I needed to leave. I needed to get away from his suffocating control. But as I reached for the ignition, a tap on the window made me jump. It was Mrs. Gable, the neighbor. She was wrapped in a heavy wool coat, clutching a casserole dish she must have retrieved from her car. She looked around nervously, checking the front door of the house to make sure Curtis wasn't watching. I rolled down the window. "Mrs. Gable?" "I shouldn't be saying anything," she whispered, her breath puffing in the cold air. "Curtis, he is a powerful man in the HOA now. But Elena, I knew your mother since you were in diapers." "What is it?" I asked, leaning closer. "You were asking about the will," she said, her eyes darting back to the house. "I don't know about papers, but I know what I saw. 2 weeks ago, it was a Tuesday, a van came to the house. It had a logo on the side. Something bank or credit union, a mobile notary service." "A notary?" My heart skipped a beat. "Was Mom awake?" Mrs. Gable shook her head. "That is the thing, honey. The notary didn't go inside." I was walking my dog. I saw Curtis come out to the driveway. He met the man at the car. He had a clipboard. He put it on the hood of his sedan. He signed. Then the notary signed. They shook hands, and the man left. Your mother never stepped foot outside, and that notary never stepped foot inside. A notary is supposed to witness the signature of the person named in the document. If Curtis was signing on the hood of a car while my mother was inside in a morphine sleep, that was fraud. That was forgery. "Thank you, Mrs. Gable," I whispered. She patted my arm through the window. "You be careful, Elena. He has got a way of making people believe the sky is green if it suits him." She hurried away. I sat there, my mind racing. A notary on the driveway, a trust that vanished, a lawyer who was afraid to talk. I needed proof, physical proof. I couldn't get into the house safe. I couldn't access the bank accounts yet. But there was one asset that was always overlooked in the grand scheme of things, but which left a paper trail. My mother's car. It was a 3-year-old Lexus, parked in the garage. Curtis rarely drove it. He preferred his truck. I got out of my car and walked to the garage. The side door was unlocked. I slipped inside. The garage was cold and smelled of oil and sawdust. I opened the passenger door of the Lexus and popped the glove box. I dug through the manual, the tire gauge, the old napkins. Finally, I found the registration and the title, in Colorado. You can keep the title in the vehicle if you want, though it is not recommended. Curtis, in his arrogance or perhaps his oversight, had left it there. I pulled it out. It was the original title, but there was a staple in the corner attaching a new form, a statement of transfer on death. I looked at the date. It was dated 14 days ago, the same Tuesday Mrs. Gable had seen the notary. The beneficiary name had been typed in Curtis Vale, and there, at the bottom, was my mother's signature. I stared at it. I knew my mother's hand. I knew the loop of her M and the sharp cross of her T. This signature was shaky. Yes, it looked like the writing of a sick woman, but there was a hesitation in the ink flow, a pause at the top of the P. It looked like someone drawing a signature, not writing one, and more importantly, 14 days ago. My mother could not hold a spoon, let alone a pen. She had been in and out of consciousness. I took a photo of the document with my phone. Then I put it back exactly as I found it. I walked back to the driveway. I was shaking, but not from the cold. I was shaking with the clarity of it. He hadn't just waited for her to die. He had actively dismantled her legacy while she lay dying in the next room. I started my car. As I backed out of the driveway, the front door of the house opened. Curtis stood there. He was still wearing his suit jacket, but he had loosened his tie. He watched me with that same calm, detached expression he had worn at the funeral. He didn't wave. He didn't look angry. He looked like a man surveying a pest he had successfully exterminated. I rolled down my window one last time as I passed him. He walked down the steps, stopping just a few feet from my car. "Safe drive back to Denver," he said. His voice was smooth. carrying easily over the sound of my engine. "Don't rush back, Elena. There is nothing for you to do here. I will mail you the check for your share of the checking account. It should be enough to cover your gas." "This isn't over, Curtis," I said. He smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a smile that chilled me more than the wind. "It was over the day she married me," he said softly. "You just didn't notice." He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper that felt like a razor across my skin. "Go home, Elena. You don't belong here." He turned and walked back toward the house, the grand brick home that my mother had bought, the home that was now his fortress. I drove away. I drove until the house disappeared in the rearview mirror, until the town of Hollow Creek was just a cluster of lights behind me. But I didn't go back to Denver. I pulled into a motel on the edge of the highway. He thought he had won because he held the keys. He thought I was just the impulsive, emotional stepdaughter who would run away and cry. He was right about one thing: I was emotional. But he forgot that anger is an emotion too, and anger, when focused, is a fuel that burns longer than grief. I looked at the photo of the forged signature on my phone. "You don't belong here," he had said. "We would see about that." I returned to Hollow Creek because I am a creature of compliance. That is not just my job title, it is the way my brain is wired. After leaving the motel and driving halfway back to Denver, I realized I had left a crucial folder of tax documents on the dining room table. They were not just sentimental papers. They were the filings from 3 years ago that the IRS would demand if they decided to audit the transfer of the estate. Curtis would not care if the estate was fined. I did. I cared about the clean lines of the law. And leaving those papers behind felt like leaving a door unlocked. It was a mistake. A fatal, stupid mistake, born of a need for order. I pulled into the driveway at 10:30 at night. The storm had already begun, transforming the world into a swirling vortex of white violence. The snow was coming down in sheets, horizontal and heavy, driven by a wind that shook the chassis of my car. I could barely see the house through the windshield. It looked like a dark ship navigating a white ocean. I texted Curtis from the driveway. "Forgot the tax binder. Coming in to grab it. 5 minutes." He didn't reply. I ran from the car to the porch, shielding my face. The cold was instantaneous, a sharp slap against my skin. I punched the code into the smart lock, 4129, the mechanism word, and the bolt slid back. I stepped inside, shaking the snow from my coat, grateful for the wall of warmth that hit me. The house was quiet, too quiet. "Curtis," I called out. He appeared from the kitchen. He was wearing that same beige cardigan, holding a glass of amber liquid. He looked at me, not with surprise, but with a strange, heavy expectancy. "You have terrible timing, Elena," he said. "The power has been flickering for an hour. The storm is hitting the grid hard." "I just need the binder," I said, walking toward the dining room. "I will be gone in 10 seconds. I grabbed the folder. As I turned to leave, the house plunged into darkness. It was absolute. No standby lights on the television, no hum of the refrigerator. Just the sudden, oppressive blackness of a house dead in the water. "Damn it," Curtis's voice came from the dark. "That is the main breaker. It trips every time the wind hits the transformer down the road. Elena, you are closer to the side door. Can you flip the main switch on the external box? I would go, but my knee is acting up with this pressure." I hesitated. My compliance brain analyzed the request. It was logical. The breaker box was indeed outside. Next to the porch I had just entered from, it was a simple task. "Fine," I said. "Do you have a flashlight?" "Use your phone," he said. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and navigated back to the front door. I opened it. The wind howled, trying to rip the handle from my grip. Snow swirled into the foyer. "Hurry," Curtis said from the darkness behind me, "before the heat escapes." I stepped out onto the porch. The door shut behind me. I didn't think anything of it. The wind was strong. It would naturally blow the door shut. I turned to the side wall where the breaker panel was mounted. I lifted the metal flap. The switches were all in the on position. Nothing had tripped. A cold knot formed in my stomach that had nothing to do with the weather. I stared at the switches, illuminated by the shaking beam of my phone light. If the breakers were on, the power outage wasn't mechanical, it was manual. Someone had cut the main power from the inside, or I spun around and grabbed the handle of the front door. It wouldn't turn. I punched in the code. 4129. The keypad lit up red. Access denied. I tried again. My fingers were already stiffening, but I was precise. 4129. Access denied. Then I heard it. The sound I would never forget. From inside the house, the faint electronic chime of the smart home hub. Beep, beep, and then the mechanical grind of the deadbolt engaging the secondary lockdown mode. I hammered my fist on the door. "Curtis, the code isn't working, open the door." For a moment, there was nothing but the roaring wind. Then, the foyer light flickered back on. The power hadn't been out. He had just turned off the foyer switch. Curtis stepped into the pool of light on the other side of the glass panel. He looked warm. He looked comfortable. He raised his glass to his lips and took a slow sip. He was not rushing to help. He was not fumbling with the lock. He was watching me. I pounded on the glass. "Curtis, open the damn door. It is freezing out here." He walked closer to the glass. He didn't shout. He spoke in a normal speaking voice, knowing I could hear him through the thin pane if I stopped screaming. "The lock seems to be jammed. Elena," he said. His voice was muffled but clear. "System update. It happens. Just wait a bit. It usually resets in 20 minutes. I will be dead in 20 minutes, I screamed. "Open it manually." "I can't," he mouthed, shrugging with exaggerated helplessness. "Safety protocol. Once it jams, it seals. You know how technology is. You are the smart one. You figure it out." He looked at his watch. Then he looked at me. There was no panic in his eyes. There was only calculation. He was timing it. He was estimating how long it takes for a human body to succumb to hypothermia in -8-degree weather. "Just stay calm," he said. "The snow will stop soon." He turned around. He actually turned his back on me. He walked into the living room, and I saw the glow of the television turning on. Panic is a chemical dump. It flooded my system, making my heart hammer against my ribs. I needed to think. I needed to get inside. The garage. I scrambled off the porch, my boots sinking into 8 inches of fresh snow. I fought my way around the corner of the house to the side service door of the garage. It was usually unlocked. I grabbed the handle, locked. I fell to my knees in the snow, digging frantically at the base of the decorative planter near the door. My mother kept a spare key there, hidden inside a fake rock. It had been there for 10 years. I found the rock. I smashed it open against the pavement, empty. The hollow space inside the fake stone stared back at me like a blind eye. He had removed it. He had swept the perimeter. This wasn't an impulsive act of cruelty. This was a choreographed execution. I staggered back to the front porch, the wind whipping my hair into my eyes, blinding me. My hands were burning now, a searing pain that was quickly fading into a dangerous numbness. I needed shelter. I looked up at the security camera mounted above the garage. I waved my arms. "Help!" I screamed at the lens. "Record this, Curtis." Then I stopped. The camera wasn't pointing at the driveway. It wasn't pointing at the porch. It had been twisted on its mount, facing the blank siding of the house. He had blinded the digital witnesses. I spun around, looking at the street. The neighbor's house, the Millers, was dark. Their lights were out. It was nearly 11 at night, but they had a doorbell camera. If I could get to their door, if I could ring their bell, I would be saved. I stepped off the porch again. The snow was deeper now. The plows hadn't come through. The drift at the bottom of the stairs was up to my knees. I tried to run, but the snow acted like a heavy, wet blanket, dragging at my legs. I stumbled. I fell face first into the white powder. The cold went straight through my jeans, freezing my skin instantly. I pushed myself up. My breath was coming in ragged, shallow gasps. The air was so cold it felt like inhaling glass shards. I looked at the Miller's house. It was 200 yards away. In this wind, against this snow, it might as well have been 200 miles. I reached for my phone again. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped it into the drift. I pressed the side button. The screen lit up, dim and sluggish. 7% battery. I tried to open the phone app. It crashed. The cold was killing the processor. I didn't have time for a call that might drop. I didn't have the dexterity to type a text. I opened the voice recorder app. I hit the red button. I held the phone close to my mouth, shielding it with my frozen hand. "My name is Elena Patterson," I said, my voice slurring from the cold. "It is 11:48 p.m. I am at 422 Cedar Ridge Lane. I am locked outside. My stepfather, Curtis Vale, lured me out and engaged the deadlock. He removed the spare keys. He rotated the cameras. He is inside. He is watching me freeze. If I am found dead, this was not an accident. This was murder. Check the smart lock logs. Check the trust amendment. Check the notary." I stopped. I gasped for air. "Curtis Vale killed me." I stopped the recording. I prayed the file saved before the phone died. I shoved the phone deep inside my coat, against my chest, hoping my core body heat would keep the memory alive, even if I didn't. I couldn't make it to the neighbors. My legs wouldn't listen to me anymore. The cold had moved from my skin to my muscles. I was becoming a statue. I dragged myself back toward the porch steps. If I was going to die, I wanted to die right in front of his door. I wanted my frozen corpse to be the first thing he had to step over in the morning. I grabbed the railing. I pulled myself up one step, then another. I collapsed on the decking. My vision was tunneling. The white snow was turning gray at the edges. I looked out toward the street one last time. Through the swirling white chaos, I saw a shape, a black SUV. It was parked at the very end of the cul-de-sac, half buried in the drift, under the old spruce tree. The engine was running. I could see the exhaust plume. It was the only thing moving in the entire world. I didn't have the energy to wave. I didn't have the energy to scream. I just stared at it, my eyes locking onto the dark windshield. "Please," I thought, "just see me." As if in answer to a prayer I hadn't spoken aloud. The headlights of the SUV flashed. Once, long and bright. It wasn't an accidental flicker. It was a signal. It was a deliberate, human action cutting through the storm. "I see you." I didn't know who was in that car. I didn't know why they were watching my mother's house in the middle of a blizzard. But as the darkness of hypothermia finally began to pull a curtain over my mind, that single flash of light was the only thing that told me I wasn't alone. Curtis Vale thought he had erased me. He thought the snow would hide his crime. He didn't know the audience had arrived before the curtain even went up. The first thing I felt was not warmth, but pain. It was a sharp, prickly burning sensation that started in my fingertips and shot up my arms like liquid fire. "She is coming around," a voice said. It was deep and unfamiliar. I opened my eyes. The world was awash of spinning red and blue lights reflecting off the white snow. I was not on the porch anymore. I was sitting in the back of an ambulance, wrapped in 3 heavy thermal blankets. A paramedic was rubbing my hands briskly. I looked past him. Out the open doors of the vehicle, there were 2 police cruisers parked in the driveway, their lights cutting through the storm which had finally begun to settle into a steady, quiet flake. And there was Curtis. He was standing on the porch, the same porch where he had just watched me freeze. But he wasn't holding a bourbon glass anymore. He was wearing a coat over his pajamas, his hair deliberately mussed. He was talking to a police officer, gesturing wildly with his hands. He looked distraught. He looked terrified. He was putting on the performance of a lifetime. I tried to stand up, but the paramedic put a firm hand on my shoulder. "Stay down, ma'am. Your core temperature dropped to 94 degrees. You are lucky Mrs. Miller heard you banging before the wind picked up." Mrs. Miller, the neighbor, not the black car. The people in the black SUV had watched, signaled, but they hadn't called. They had let the scene play out just long enough to get whatever footage they needed. "He locked me out," I rasped. My voice sounded like gravel rattling in a tin can. "Officer, he locked me out." The officer talking to Curtis turned his head. He was a young guy, maybe 30, with a face reddened by the cold. He walked over to the ambulance, notebook in hand. Curtis followed him, staying just a few steps behind, looking like a concerned parent hovering over a toddler. "Ms. Patterson," the officer asked. "I am Officer Higgins. Can you tell me what happened?" "He lured me out," I said, pointing a shaking finger at Curtis. "He said the breaker tripped. Then he engaged the deadlock. He watched me from the window. He was drinking." Officer Higgins frowned. He looked back at Curtis. Curtis stepped forward, his face a mask of pained confusion. "Elena, honey, what are you talking about? I was asleep. I took a sleeping pill at 10. I didn't hear a thing until the police sirens woke me up." "Liar," I screamed, struggling against the blankets. "You were standing right there. You looked me in the eye." Curtis looked at the officer and sighed. It was a sound of deep, exhausted pity. "Officer, she has been struggling. Her mother passed away 6 weeks ago. Elena took it very hard. She came over tonight looking for tax papers," she said. "But she was agitated, manic. I told her to come back in the morning, but she started screaming about the house, about the will. I thought she drove away." "I did not drive away." "You locked the door." "The door locks automatically at 11, Curtis said smoothly. "It is a smart system. If she went out on the porch to, I don't know, cool off smoke, it would have locked behind her. If I was asleep, I wouldn't have heard the code fail." "I don't smoke," I yelled. "And the code didn't fail. You blocked it." The officer looked at me. I knew what he saw. He saw a woman with matted hair, shivering violently, screaming accusations that sounded paranoid. Then he looked at Curtis, a well-dressed, calm, grieving widower standing in his own driveway. "Have you been drinking tonight, Ms. Patterson?" the officer asked. "No." "She has a history of episodes," Curtis whispered to the officer, loud enough for me to hear. "Since the funeral, she has been seeing things, paranoia. We have been trying to get her to see a therapist in Denver." I stared at him. The lie was so bold, so complete. It took the air out of my lungs. He was diagnosing me to the police while I was still thawing out. "We are going to need you to come to the station to give a statement once you are medically cleared," Officer Higgins said, closing his notebook. "But for now, let's just get you warm." "I am not going back in that house," I said. "Of course not," Curtis said quickly. "I will pay for a hotel. The Marriott out on the highway. I just want you to be safe. Elena, I am so sorry I didn't hear you. I will never forgive myself." He reached out as if to touch my hand. I recoiled so hard I nearly fell off the gurney. "Don't touch me," I hissed. He pulled his hand back, looking wounded. The officer gave me a stern look. "Ma'am, he is trying to help." I realized then that I had already lost the scene. In the theater of public safety, the calm man wins, the screaming woman loses. I spent the night at the motel I had checked into earlier. I didn't sleep. I sat in the shower under scalding water for 40 minutes until my skin turned lobster red, trying to wash the feeling of that cold wind out of my bones. When the sun came up, the world looked bright and innocent, as if the storm had never happened. But my phone told a different story. I logged onto Facebook. I knew Curtis. I knew he wouldn't let the narrative sit idle. There it was, posted at 6:15 in the morning, a photo of a single candle burning in a dark room. The caption was a masterpiece of manipulation. "I am asking for prayers this morning for my stepdaughter, Elena." Grief is a terrible, confusing monster. It makes us do things we wouldn't normally do. It makes us wander into storms, both literal and metaphorical. Last night, we had a scare at the house. Thank God for our vigilant neighbors and the prompt action of the Hollow Creek Police Department. Elena is safe now, physically, but her heart is still hurting from the loss of her mother. Please, if you see her, treat her with kindness. She is battling demons that most of us can't see. Family grief. Mental health awareness. I scrolled through the comments. My stomach turned. "Oh, Curtis, you are a saint for dealing with this. I heard sirens last night, So scary. Glad she didn't freeze. My cousin went crazy after her mom died too. Stay strong. Curtis, is this the same daughter who was making a scene at the funeral? Poor Curtis. He had painted me as a mental case, a wanderer, a woman who walked out into a blizzard because she was battling demons. Now, if I told anyone he tried to kill me, they would just nod sympathetically and say, "Yes, dear. It must have felt that way in your grief." I threw the phone onto the bed. I wanted to scream, but I forced myself to breathe. I was a compliance officer. I dealt with facts. I dealt with audits. Emotional outbursts were exactly what he wanted. Then, my work email pinged. I hesitated. It was Saturday. Why was I getting work emails? I opened the Outlook app. The subject line was urgent, ethics complaint, immediate suspension, pending investigation. It was from the Vice President of HR at Cobalt Ridge. Dear Ms. Patterson, we received a disturbing communication this morning regarding your conduct. An anonymous source has provided details regarding a police incident involving domestic harassment and potential substance abuse in Hollow Creek last night. Given the sensitive nature of your role as a senior compliance officer and our strict code of conduct regarding personal integrity, we are placing you on administrative leave effective immediately while we investigate the validity of these claims. Please do not access company servers until further notice. My hands started shaking again. Curtis didn't just want the house. He wanted to destroy my credibility so thoroughly that no one, not a judge, not a lawyer, not a jury, would ever believe a word I said. He was stripping me of my resources. No job means no money for lawyers. No credibility means no police investigation. I grabbed my phone and dialed Mara. She picked up on the first ring. "I saw the Facebook post," she said, skipping the hello. "I am currently holding myself back from commenting and telling that entire town that Curtis is a snake." "It is worse," I said, my voice trembling. "He emailed my job. I am suspended. Mara, he told them I was on drugs or something." "Okay," Mara said. Her voice was sharp, steady. "Listen to me. Breathe. Do not reply to the email yet. Do not comment on Facebook. If you argue with him in the comments, you look unstable. You look exactly like the crazy stepdaughter he is painting." So I just let him lie. "No," Mara said. "You let him talk. He is confident. He thinks he won. But confident men get sloppy. You need evidence. Elena, hard evidence. Not memories, not feelings. Data." "He wiped the camera," I said. "He turned it." "What about the lock?" Mara asked. "You said it was a smart lock. Did you check the app?" "I haven't looked yet." "Look, now." I put Mara on speaker and opened the smart home app associated with my mother's house. I had installed it for her 2 years ago. I tapped the icon. Login successful. I went to the device list. Front door. I clicked on activity log. Log cleared. The list was empty. There were no entries for last night. No unlock. No lock. No failed code. It was a blank slate. "It is gone," I said, feeling defeated. He deleted the history. I went to the Settings tab. Under User Management, I saw my name, Elena Patterson. My role had been changed from administrator to guest. "He demoted me," I said. "I can't see the deep settings anymore." "Okay," Mara said. "Think, you are an auditor. If a client deletes a transaction from a ledger, where do you look?" "The backup," I said. "The server logs." "Exactly. The app on your phone shows the user-facing data. But that log talks to a server. The manufacturer keeps diagnostic logs for troubleshooting. Every time that motor turns, it sends a packet of data to the cloud. Curtis can clear the app, but he can't clear the cloud unless he is a hacker, and we know he is just a project manager." My brain started to clear. The panic receded, replaced by the cold, hard logic of my profession. "I need to request the raw data from the manufacturer," I said. "Subpoena it." "Or," Mara said, "you find someone who can ask for it legally. You need a lawyer, Elena, a real one, not the family friend who is scared of Curtis." "Sterling," I whispered. "The old lawyer. He told me to call him Monday. It is Saturday, Mara said. Text him. Tell him you were locked out. Tell him you almost died. Scare him into helping you. I hung up with Mara and pulled up Arthur Sterling's contact. I didn't care about professional etiquette anymore. I typed, Curtis locked me out in the storm last night. Police were called. I almost died. He is erasing everything. If you know something about a trust and you don't tell me, my blood is on your hands too. I stared at the message. It was aggressive. It was desperate. I hit send. I waited. 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. My phone buzzed. It was Sterling. I heard about the police. The town is small. This is getting dangerous. I have a copy. I kept a copy of the amendment he made me witness. Even though I refused to notarize it properly, that is why he used the mobile guy. My heart hammered against my ribs. He refused to notarize it. That meant he knew it was fraud. A second message popped up. Come to my office. The back entrance. 45 minutes. And Elena. 3 dots bubbled. Don't come alone. If he is willing to use the weather to kill you, he is willing to do worse. I looked at the empty motel room. I was alone. I had no one. Mara was 4 hours away in Denver. Then I remembered the black SUV. The single flash of headlights in the storm. They had seen everything. They knew Curtis was lying. I didn't know how to find them, but I had a feeling that as soon as I made a move, they would find me. I grabbed my coat. It was still damp, but I put it on. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the compliance officer, and I was about to start the most aggressive audit of Curtis Vale's life. Arthur Sterling's law office was tucked behind a bakery on Main Street, a building that smelled faintly of yeast and old dust. I parked 2 blocks away and walked the alley to the back entrance as instructed. I felt less like a client and more like a fugitive. When I knocked, the heavy steel door opened immediately. Sterling looked older than I remembered. His hair was thinner, and there was a nervous tick in his left eyelid. He ushered me in and locked the door behind me, throwing the deadbolt with a clack that echoed too loudly in the quiet hallway. I shouldn't be doing this, he muttered, leading me into a cramped file room. Technically, Curtis is the executor. I represent the estate, and right now, he is the voice of the estate. He tried to kill me last night. Arthur, I said, my voice flat. He locked me out in -8-degree weather. If you are worried about ethics, you are worried about the wrong things. Sterling flinched. He pulled a chair out for me and sat behind a stack of banker's boxes. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Your mother came to see me 5 years ago, he said, keeping his voice low. She was lucid. She was sharp. She didn't want a simple will. She knew Curtis liked to move money around. She wanted to ensure the house and the primary investment accounts went to you. He slid a document across the table. The cover page read, The Marianne Patterson Living Trust. A trust bypasses probate, I said, my compliance training kicking in. It is a private contract. The courts don't usually see it. Exactly, Sterling said. She named herself as the initial trustee, and upon her death or incapacitation, you were named as the successor trustee, not Curtis. I stared at the paper. Me. But Curtis said there was no will. He is acting as the administrator. He is lying, Sterling said. But he is lying with a prop. He pulled out a second document. This one was thinner. Just 3 pages. It was titled, First Amendment to the Marianne Patterson Living Trust. 2 weeks before she died, Sterling said, tapping the date on the header. Curtis brought this to my office. He said Marianne wanted to make changes. He said she felt guilty about not providing enough security for her husband. This amendment removes you as the successor trustee and installs Curtis. It also grants the trustee Curtis the power to liquidate assets for his own benefit. Did she come with him? I asked. No. He brought it signed. He asked me to notarize it retroactively. I refused. I told him I needed to see her sign it. So what did he do? He left, Sterling said. And the next day, he emailed me a scanned copy. It was notarized by a mobile notary service out of Denver, a guy named Harrow. I looked him up. He has a suspended license, but he still stamps papers for $50 cash. I flipped to the signature page. There it was. Marianne Patterson. I stared at the ink. It was beautiful. It was a fluid, elegant script with a perfect, looping P and a sharp, confident underscore. It looked exactly like the signature on my report cards from 3rd grade. It looked exactly like the signature on the checks she wrote when she was 40, and that was the problem. "This is a forgery," I said. "It looks like her handwriting," Sterling challenged gently. "I compared it to the original trust. It is a very good match." "It is too good," I said. "Arthur, 2 weeks before she died, Mom couldn't hold a spoon. The cancer had metastasized to her spine and her shoulders. She had tremors so bad we had to use a sippy cup with a straw. Look at this line." I pointed to the tail of the Y in Marianne. "It is smooth, steady pressure. If Mom had signed this, the line would be jagged. It would be shaky. This was signed by someone with full motor control who practiced her signature until they got it perfect." "Proving that in court is hard," Sterling warned. "Handwriting experts are expensive and often inconclusive." "I don't need a handwriting expert," I said. "I need to follow the money. If he amended the trust to make himself the trustee, what has he done with the assets?" Sterling hesitated, then opened a folder on his laptop. He turned the screen toward me. "I am still the record keeper for the investment account attached to the trust until the bank processes the full transfer," he said. "I shouldn't show you this, but look at the withdrawals." I scanned the ledger. October 15th, $5,000. Transfer to external account. October 20th, $12,000. Transfer to external account. November 1st, 2 days after she died, $45,000. Transfer to external account. "Where is it going?" I asked. "A company called Vale Property Services," Sterling said. "I assumed it was a legit business he started. He is a project manager, after all." I froze. Vale Property Services. "Do you have the routing number?" I asked. "Or the address on the invoice?" Sterling clicked a file. "Here. The address on the wire transfer request is 1400 16th Street Mall, Suite B, Denver, Colorado." My blood ran cold. I knew that address. 2 years ago, at Cobalt Ridge, I had led an audit on a small construction firm suspected of laundering money. They had used shell companies to inflate invoice costs. Every single one of those fake companies had listed their address as 1400 16th Street Mall. Suite B? It wasn't an office. It was a virtual mailbox service. It was a co-working space where you could rent a mailing address for $20 a month to make your phantom company look legitimate on paper. "It is a shell," I said, my voice rising. "Vale Property Services doesn't exist. He is draining the trust into a fake company to hide the money before anyone realizes he shouldn't have access to it." "That is embezzlement," Sterling whispered. "And if he is the trustee, it is a breach of fiduciary duty." "It is theft," I corrected. "And I can prove the address is a drop box." I stood up. I had the trust. I had the amendment with the impossible signature. And now I had the destination of the stolen funds. "I need copies. Arthur, all of it." "Take them," he said, pushing the pile toward me. "And Elena. Get a real lawyer. I am a small-town estate planner. This is criminal litigation. I know just the person," I said. I drove out of the alleyway, my heart pounding. I called Mara immediately. "I need that shark you told me about," I said as soon as she answered. "The one who destroyed your ex-husband's business partner." "Dana Klein," Mara said. "She is in Boulder. She is expensive, Elena, like 400 an hour expensive." "I don't care," I said. "Curtis isn't just a bad stepfather. He is running a shell company scheme. I have the documents." "I will call her personal line," Mara said. "Get to Boulder. Don't go home." The drive to Boulder took an hour. The mountains were breathtaking, covered in the fresh snow that had almost killed me, but I didn't see the scenery. I saw the ledger in my mind. $45,000. That was my mother's life savings. That was the money she scrimped for. The money she wanted to keep safe. Dana Klein's office was the opposite of Sterling's. It was located in a glass-fronted building downtown, smelling of espresso and expensive leather. Dana herself was a woman made of sharp angles. She wore a charcoal suit, her hair cut in a severe bob, and she didn't offer me coffee. She pointed to the chair and asked for the papers. She read in silence for 10 minutes. She didn't blink. She flipped through the trust, the amendment, and the printout of the bank transfers. Finally, she looked up. Her eyes were gray and terrifyingly intelligent. "You said he locked you out," she asked. "Yes, last night." "And you have no record of it because he wiped the logs?" "Yes." "That is unfortunate," she said, tapping a manicured fingernail on the desk. "But this—" She slapped her hand on the bank transfer document. "This is gold. The shell company. The self-dealing." Dana said, "In Colorado, a trustee has an absolute duty of loyalty to the beneficiaries, even if that amendment were real, and we will argue it is not. He cannot transfer trust assets into a company he owns. That is textbook fiduciary fraud. It is conversion. It is civil theft. We can sue him for treble damages. That means we make him pay back 3 times what he stole." "He told the police I was crazy," I said. "He is destroying my reputation." "Of course he is," Dana said dismissively. "That is the narcissist's playbook. Isolate the victim, discredit the witness. But documents don't have mental breakdowns. Elena, documents don't get drunk. Documents don't grieve. This transfer to a virtual mailbox in Denver is a hard fact. It proves he is acting in bad faith." She stood up and walked to the whiteboard on her wall. She picked up a marker. "Here's the plan," she said, drawing a timeline. "Monday morning, we file a petition in probate court to challenge the validity of the amendment. We ask for an emergency injunction to freeze the trust assets. We allege fraud and undue influence. He will fight it," I said. "He has the house. He has the money. Let him fight." Dana smiled. It was a predatory smile. "While he is fighting the probate case, we file a separate civil suit for the theft. We subpoena the records of Vail Property Services. We subpoena the mobile notary. We make his life a living hell of depositions and discovery requests. We don't just want the money back. We want to expose the mechanism. He is smart, Dinah. He thinks he has covered his tracks." "He is arrogant," Dana corrected. "There is a difference. Smart criminals don't transfer 45 grand to a shell company 2 days after the death. That is greedy. Greed makes you stupid." I felt a weight lift off my chest. For the first time since my mother died, I wasn't just reacting, I was attacking. "One more thing," I said. "He emailed my company. He got me suspended." Dana's eyes narrowed. "Tortious interference with business relations. We will add that to the pile. By the time we are done, Mr. Vail will be wishing he had just given you the family photo albums and walked away." Just then, the phone on Dana's desk rang. It wasn't the main line. It was her private cell phone sitting on the blotter. She frowned. "I didn't authorize anyone to interrupt us." She picked it up. "This is Dana Klein." She listened. Her expression shifted from annoyance to intense curiosity. She looked at me, her eyes widening slightly. "Who is this?" she asked the caller. She listened again for a long moment. Then she put the phone on speaker and set it down between us. "Elena," Dana said, her voice serious. "You need to hear this." "Hello?" I said. The voice on the other end was female, professional, and crisp. It sounded like the voice of someone who wore a badge. "Ms. Patterson," the voice said. "My name is Special Agent Lauren Pierce. I am with the Financial Crimes Division. I believe you are sitting with your attorney." "I am," I said. "How did you get this number?" "We have been monitoring Curtis Vail's communications for 6 months," the agent said. "We are investigating a ring of insurance fraud and money laundering involving snow removal contracts and shell real estate entities." My mouth fell open. Snow removal contracts. That explained why he had so much business in the winter. "Why are you calling me?" I asked. "Because last night, Agent Pierce said. My team was conducting surveillance on the residence at 422 Cedar Ridge Lane. We were there to document a meeting Curtis was supposed to have with an associate. The associate didn't show up, but you did. I stopped breathing. The black SUV. You were there, I whispered. We were, Pierce confirmed. We have a high-definition video recording of the entire incident. We have footage of you banging on the door. We have footage of Curtis Vale standing in the window, holding a drink, looking at his watch, and walking away. We have footage of him turning off the porch light. Dana let out a low whistle. Jesus. I am not authorized to intervene in a civil inheritance dispute. Agent Pierce continued. My investigation is federal and ongoing. However, what we witnessed last night was attempted manslaughter. It establishes a pattern of extreme danger. I am releasing a certified copy of the video to your attorney under a protective order. Why? I asked. Why help me now? Because, the agent said, and I could hear the cold steel in her voice. We saw him turn the camera. Elena, he knew exactly what he was doing, and frankly, we are ready to see him go down. Check your email. Ms. Klein, the file is sent. Dana looked at her laptop. A notification pinged. She clicked the link. A video player opened. There it was. The grainy but clear night vision footage. Me, small and desperate, pounding on the door, and Curtis, clear as day, standing behind the glass, smug, calm. A murderer in a cashmere sweater. Dana looked up at me. The predatory smile was gone, replaced by the look of a general who had just been handed a nuclear weapon. This isn't a family dispute anymore, Dana said softly. This is a war crime. She looked at the phone. Agent Pierce, do we have your permission to use this in the emergency hearing on Monday? Burn him, Agent Pierce said, and then the line went dead. Dana closed the laptop. She leaned back in her chair and looked at me. Elena, she said, go back to your hotel, order room service, sleep, because Monday morning, we are going to walk into that courtroom and we are going to peel the skin off Curtis Vale's life, layer by layer. I walked out of the office into the bright Boulder sunshine. The air was crisp, but I didn't feel cold anymore. I had the trust, I had the fraud, and now I had the tape. Curtis Vale had locked me out in the snow to hide his secrets. He didn't realize that by doing so, he had performed his crimes on the brightest stage possible, for an audience he never knew existed. The voice on the speakerphone had introduced herself as Special Agent Lauren Pierce, but it took a moment for the gravity of that title to settle into the leather-scented air of Dana Klein's office. I was sitting forward in my chair, my hands gripping the armrest so hard my knuckles were white. Federal agent, I asked, looking at the phone. You are FBI. Treasury Department, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, the voice corrected. We don't chase bank robbers, Ms. Patterson. We chase the money that robbers try to hide. Dana leaned over the desk. If you are Treasury, that means you are not looking at Curtis for a domestic dispute. You are looking at him for structuring. We are looking at him for a lot of things, Agent Pierce said. Her tone was dry, professional, and terrifyingly calm. We have had eyes on a network of fraudulent service providers in Colorado for 18 months. We call them the snow washes. Companies that claim to provide seasonal services, snow removal, landscaping, gutter cleaning to bill for work that never happens. It is a classic way to clean cash. Snow melts. The evidence disappears with the season. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Curtis runs a logistics team. He doesn't plow snow. He does on paper, Pierce said. Vale Property Services has billed over $200,000 in snow removal fees to commercial lots in Denver that don't exist. He is also running a side scheme with insurance claims, storm damage repairs on roofs that were never damaged. We have been building a case to indict him and 3 of his associates. So you were there, I whispered. That black SUV. You were watching him. We had intel that he was meeting a courier that night to hand off cash, Pierce said. We were parked at the end of the cul-de-sac to document the transaction. We didn't get the transaction. We got you. I closed my eyes. I could see the scene in my mind. The dark street, the silent car, the flash of the headlights. "Why didn't you help me sooner?" I asked. The question came out sharper than I intended. "I could have died." "We are surveillance, Ms. Patterson. We are ghosts. If we break cover, the entire investigation into the network collapses," Pierce said. There was a pause, and her voice softened. Just a fraction. But when the temperature dropped and he turned off the porch light, my partner had his hand on the door handle. "We were 10 seconds away from aborting the mission to extract you. Then the neighbor turned on her lights, and we saw you move. We flashed the lights to let you know you weren't invisible. We made sure the ambulance arrived before we pulled back." "You have the video," Dana interrupted, steering the conversation back to the legal strategy. "You sent me a link." "I did," Pierce said. "I cannot step into a probate court and testify about the money laundering yet. That part of the case is sealed. If I testify, Curtis knows we are watching the money, and his partners will vanish. I cannot blow the federal indictment to save a civil inheritance." "Then what good is the video?" I asked, feeling a wave of hopelessness. "I can't testify about the money," Pierce said, "but I can provide the video as evidence of a person of interest engaging in behavior that endangers life. I am giving this to you as a citizen who witnessed a crime, not as an agent building a case. Use it to prove he is dangerous. Use it to prove he locked that door, but do not mention the money laundering in open court. Not yet." "Understood," Dana said. She was already typing on her laptop. "We use the video to establish malice. We use the trust documents to establish motive. We keep the federal investigation in our back pocket as the nuclear option." "Good luck, Ms. Patterson," Pierce said. "And stay safe. A man who locks his daughter in the snow is a man who has run out of options. Desperate men are dangerous." The line went dead. Dana looked at me. "Okay, this changes the landscape. We are not just fighting a greedy stepfather, we are fighting a cornered criminal." "What do we do?" I asked. "We hit him on 2 fronts," Dana said, standing up and pacing the small office. "Front 1 is probate court. I am filing an emergency petition tomorrow morning to freeze the assets of the Marianne Patterson Trust. We will argue that the amendment is forged and that the current trustee Curtis has demonstrated hostility toward the primary beneficiary, you." "And front 2, civil court," Dana said. "We sue him for intentional infliction of emotional distress and false imprisonment. We use the video. We demand a restraining order against him. He already told the police I was the crazy one," I said. "He is controlling the narrative." "Narratives crumble under data," Dana said. "You said you couldn't get the logs from the Smart Lock app, but you are a compliance officer. You know that data lives somewhere." "The manufacturer," I said. "SmartGuard Systems. They keep server-side logs for warranty purposes." "Get them," Dana ordered. "I will draft the subpoenas. But if you can get a customer service rep to email you a diagnostic report today, we can attach it to the filing tomorrow." I spent the next 2 hours in a frenzy of phone calls. I called the support line for SmartGuard. I used my most authoritative auditor voice. I told them I was the owner of the house which, technically, under the original trust, I was troubleshooting a critical failure during a weather event. It took 3 transfers and 40 minutes of hold music, but I finally got a Tier 2 technician named Marcus. "I see the device," Marcus said. "It looks like it is online now." "What is the issue?" "I need to know why the code failed last night at 11:47, I said. "My father says the lock jammed." "1 second, Marcus said. I could hear him typing. "No, I don't see a jam error. Motor resistance was normal." "Then why didn't it open?" "Because the administrative rights were toggled," Marcus said casually. At 11:46 p.m., the primary user account Curtis initiated a lockdown mode command from the mobile app. That disables the external keypad. Then, 30 seconds later, the user permissions for Elena were downgraded from admin to guest, and the schedule was set to no access. "Can you send me that in writing?" I asked, my voice trembling. "A screenshot of the server log." "I am not supposed to." Marcus, I said. Please. I was stuck outside in a blizzard. I need to prove I'm not crazy. There was a silence. Then, check your email in 5 minutes. When the email arrived, it was a simple text file, but it was beautiful. Timestamp 234612. Command Global Lockdown. User Curtis, Maine. Timestamp 234645. Command Edit User Perm. Elena. New status restricted. He hadn't been asleep. He hadn't been drunk. He had been tapping on his phone screen with the precision of a surgeon, deleting my access to safety while I stood 5 feet away. I forwarded the file to Dana. Got it, I said. Perfect, Dana replied. We are ready. But Curtis was not sitting idle. As I was leaving Dana's office to head back to my hotel, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the strange, interconnected world of modern digital justice. I had a Google alert set up for my own name, a habit from my job. A new public record had been indexed in the county clerk's database. Plaintiff Curtis Vale, defendant Elena Patterson, case type order of protection. I froze on the sidewalk. I clicked the link. It was a summary of a filing made 2 hours ago. Curtis had gone to the local magistrate. He was asking for a restraining order against me. I called Dana, panic rising in my throat. He filed against me. He is saying I am dangerous. Dana didn't sound worried. She actually laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. Of course he did, she said. He is trying to play the victim card before we can play ours. What did he allege? I can't see the details. Just the header, harassment, trespassing. Let him, Dana said. This is actually good for us. How is being legally banned from my mother's house good for us? Because, Dana explained, to get a permanent restraining order, there has to be a hearing. He has to stand in front of a judge and swear under oath that you are the aggressor. He has to testify, and once he is on the stand, I get to cross-examine him. She paused, and I could hear the smile in her voice. He thinks he is silencing you. What he is actually doing is expediting his own execution. He just booked himself a court date next week. We don't have to wait for the probate docket. We can ambush him at his own restraining order hearing. I went back to the hotel room, but I couldn't sleep. The adrenaline was still coursing through my veins. I sat on the bed, staring at the wall, thinking about the layers of lies Curtis had built, the fake business, the fake grief, the fake father figure. My laptop chimed. It was an email from Agent Pierce. Ms. Patterson, I thought you should see this. It is a still frame from the end of the video file I sent your attorney. Zoom in on the dining room table. I opened the attachment. The image was grainy, taken from a distance through a window with night vision enhancement. It showed Curtis standing in the foyer, his back to the dining room, looking out at the porch where I was freezing. He looked calm, but behind him, on the dining room table, illuminated by the light from the kitchen, was a stack of papers. I zoomed in. The resolution was surprisingly high. The top folder was open. It was a thick blue legal binder, and written across the front of the document inside, in bold, black letters that were legible even through the grain, were the words, First Amendment to Trust, and right next to it, sitting open, was a black notebook. I recognized that notebook. It was my mother's practice journal, the one she used to practice calligraphy. I zoomed in further on the notebook. The page was filled with a single repeated phrase, written over and over again in blue ink. Marianne Patterson, Marianne Patterson, Marianne Patterson. He hadn't just forged the signature. He had sat at her dining table, practicing her name, perfecting the crime, and then he had left the evidence out while he walked to the door to kill her daughter. I stared at the screen. The fear was gone. The shock was gone. All that was left was a cold, hard determination that felt a lot like the ice I had survived. Okay, Curtis, I whispered to the empty room. You want a court date? You got one. The legal counterattack from Curtis Vale did not arrive with the dignity of a summons served by a sheriff. It arrived with the bluster of a billboard advertisement. His lawyer was a man named Barry Golson, a strip mall attorney whose face was plastered on bus benches throughout the county with the slogan, Golson gets you gold. Golson was loud, cheap, and specialized in personal injury, not estate law, but he was aggressive. And right now, Curtis needed a bulldog to scare me off. On Tuesday morning, 2 days after the blizzard, Golson filed a motion to dismiss my petition for a freeze on the trust assets. His filing was a work of fiction so audacious it was almost impressive. According to Curtis and Golson, I was not a victim. I was a violent intruder with a history of substance abuse who had broken onto the property in a drug-induced rage. Curtis claimed he had locked the door in self-defense, fearing for his life. He claimed I had been pounding on the glass, threatening to burn the house down. He is flipping the script, I told Dana as we sat in her conference room, reviewing the filing. He is using the stand your ground narrative. It is a desperate narrative, Dana said, not looking up from her iPad. And he is making mistakes. Look at this. She slid a report across the table. It wasn't a legal document. It was a surveillance log provided by Agent Pierce's team. Monday morning, at 9:15, Dana said, Curtis went to the electronics store on the highway. He bought a new high-end router, 3 new smart locks, and a hard drive shredder. He is replacing the system, I said. He is wiping the evidence. In the legal world, we call that spoliation of evidence, Dana said, a sharp smile touching her lips. If he was innocent, he would preserve the logs to prove the lock malfunctioned. By ripping out the hardware 24 hours after an incident, he is screaming that he has something to hide. We don't even need the old logs to prove he is guilty. The receipt for the new router is enough to convince a judge he is acting in bad faith. But Curtis wasn't just destroying hardware. He was manufacturing witnesses. Included in Golson's filing was an affidavit from a man named Greg Polson. I knew the name. Greg was one of Curtis's drinking buddies, a man who spent his weekends complaining about alimony payments at the local dive bar. The affidavit read, Greg Polson, was arriving at the Vale residence at 11:50 p.m. on the night of the incident to return a borrowed tool. I witnessed Ms. Patterson screaming obscenities and kicking the door. She appeared intoxicated. I saw Mr. Vale inside, looking terrified. I left immediately to avoid confrontation. He has a witness, I said, feeling a spike of anxiety. It is his word against mine. Is it? Dana asked. She tapped a video file on her laptop. It was footage from the Miller's doorbell camera, my neighbors. Dana had sent an investigator to their house that morning. Mrs. Miller, bless her heart, had been more than happy to share her cloud data. We watched the video. The timestamp was 11:50 p.m. The street was empty. The snow was falling. There was no car in the driveway except mine. There was no Greg Polson. Dana scrubbed the video forward. At 12:25 a.m., nearly 40 minutes later, a pickup truck pulled up. Greg Polson got out. But by then, the police were already there. The ambulance was there. Greg stood on the sidewalk, spoke to an officer for 30 seconds, and then drove away. He lied under oath, Dana said softly. He swore he was there during the incident. The camera proves he arrived after the curtain fell. We are going to let him testify. Elena, we are going to let him sit on that stand and tell his story. And then we are going to play this video and ask the judge if he would like to refer Mr. Polson for perjury charges. It was a trap. And Curtis, in his arrogance, had just walked his best friend right into it. By Wednesday, the pressure was mounting. Dana had secured an emergency hearing, and the judge had granted a temporary restraining order on the trust assets. That meant Curtis was frozen. He couldn't withdraw a cent. He couldn't write checks. And based on the frantic activity Agent Pierce was seeing on the financial side, Curtis was bleeding cash. He is desperate for liquidity, Agent Pierce told me over a secure line that afternoon. The people he is washing money for, they don't like it when their accounts get frozen. He needs to pay them out, or things get physical. That desperation led to his next mistake. My phone alerted me to a new listing on Zillow. I had set alerts for all properties owned by my mother. A vacant lot near the lake, a piece of land my mother had bought 20 years ago with intentions to build a studio, was suddenly listed as pending sale. The price was 60% of market value. It was a fire sale. He is trying to sell the land for cash, I told Dana. How the title is in Mom's name. Dana made 2 calls. 10 minutes later, she had a copy of the closing documents from the title company. He is using a power of attorney, Dana said, scanning the PDF. Dated 4 weeks ago, I looked at the document. It granted Curtis unlimited power to dispose of real estate. Dana, I said, pointing to the date. 4 weeks ago, Mom was in the palliative care unit. She was on a morphine drip. She didn't know what day of the week it was. There is no way she signed a complex real estate power of attorney. We challenge it, Dana said. We send this to the title company immediately. We tell them the POA is contested and likely forged. If they proceed with the sale, they become liable. We sent the letter. The title company, terrified of litigation, canceled the sale within the hour. Curtis had tried to grab quick cash, and we had slammed the drawer on his fingers, but the most dangerous move was yet to come. On Thursday morning, I received a call from the bank where my mother held her primary checking account, the one Curtis was trying to drain. Ms. Patterson, the branch manager said, sounding confused. We received your email authorizing the release of the hold on the funds, but the signature doesn't match the one we have on file for the freeze request. What email? I asked. The one from your Gmail account. You sent it an hour ago. You said you made a mistake and that you wanted to drop the dispute. I did not send that email, I said, my voice shaking. It came from Elena. Patterson 88 Gmail. Come on, the manager said. Is that not you? My email is Elena. Patterson, compliance, I said. That is a fake account. I hung up and called Dana. He is impersonating me. He made a fake email address to trick the bank. Get me the header, Dana said. Tell the bank to forward the email as an attachment. We need the metadata. The bank manager complied. I forwarded the raw data to Dana, who sent it to Agent Pierce's team for analysis. 20 minutes later, Agent Pierce called. He is not a smart man, Pierce said. He sent that email using a spoofed address, thinking that would hide him, but he didn't mask his IP address. Where did it come from? 1400 16th Street Mall, Pierce said. The co-working space, specifically, the Wi-Fi network for Suite B, the same suite he uses for Vail Property Services. He sent a fake email pretending to be me, from the physical office of his own shell company. Correct, Pierce said. He just tied the identity theft, the bank fraud, and the money laundering operations together into one neat little knot. He verified that he controls that office space. I sat back in my chair. It was almost tragic. Curtis was so used to bullying people, my mother, me, his employees, that he thought he could bully the internet. He thought technology would bend to his will just because he was a man who demanded order. Dana advised me to stay silent. Don't post on social media, she said. Don't give interviews. Curtis is out there right now talking to the Hollow Creek Gazette, spinning his story about the crazy stepdaughter. Let him talk. Every word he says is another lie he has to remember. When we get into court, we will play his interviews back to him and compare them to the timestamps on the logs. So I watched from my hotel room as Curtis gave a tearful interview on the local news station. He looked haggard. He talked about family betrayal and greed. He said he prayed for me every night. It was hard to watch. I wanted to scream. I wanted to post the video of him locking the door. But I held the line. I was the auditor. I was gathering the data. Friday evening, the sun was setting over the mountains, casting long purple shadows across the snow. The emergency hearing was scheduled for Monday morning. My phone buzzed. It was a text message from Curtis. He hadn't blocked me. He was too arrogant for that. You think you are clever with your lawyers, the text read, but you don't have the stamina for this. I have resources you don't know about. I have friends in this town. Drop the suit. Elena, walk away, or I will release the medical records from your college years. You know, the ones about your anxiety. You won't win. He was threatening to leak my private medical history. He was trying to blackmail me into submission. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I wanted to tell him about the video. I wanted to tell him about the FBI. I wanted to tell him that his resources were currently being indicted by the Treasury Department. But I didn't. Instead, I took a screenshot. I sent it to Dana. I sent it to Agent Pierce. A moment later, a message came through from Agent Pierce. We just intercepted a login attempt. Pierce wrote, "He just tried to access a cloud storage account linked to his Snowwash partners. He is trying to move the files. He is panicked." I watched the 3 dots on Pierce's message bubble bounce. He just transferred a file called Ledger 2024 to a personal drive. He thinks he is saving it. He actually just confirmed possession of the stolen funds. The text from Curtis, "You won't win," was still sitting at the top of my screen. Pierce sent one final message. He just messed up. He just gave us the last piece of the puzzle. "See you in court." Elena. I put the phone down. Outside, the snow had stopped falling. The sky was clear and full of stars. The storm was over, but for Curtis Vale, the avalanche was just beginning. District Courtroom 4 was a windowless box of blonde wood and fluorescent lighting that smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. It was a place designed to strip away emotion and leave only the cold, hard bones of the law. This was the environment Curtis Vale feared most. In the living room of my mother's house, he could manipulate reality with a sigh or a disappointed look. He could control the narrative because he controlled the audience. But here, in front of the Honorable Judge Evelyn Vance, a woman known for her impatience with theatrics, his sighs were just noise. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Dana. She looked like a shark in a navy suit. Her files arranged with military precision. Across the aisle, Curtis sat with Barry Golson. Golson was already sweating, his tie slightly askew, shuffling a stack of papers that looked like they had been dropped and hastily reorganized. Curtis, however, looked impeccable. He was wearing a charcoal suit, his hands clasped on the table, his face a portrait of the grieving, misunderstood patriarch. He nodded at me as I sat down. It was a small, sad nod, a performance for the bailiff. "All rise," the bailiff droned. Judge Vance swept in, her robes billowing. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and looked at the docket. "In the matter of the estate of Marianne Patterson," she said, "we are here on an emergency petition to remove the trustee and a cross motion for a restraining order. Mr. Golson, you may begin, and please, keep it brief. I have read the filings." Golson stood up, hitching up his pants. "Your Honor, this petition is a tragic waste of the court's time. My client, Mr. Vale, is the lawful trustee of his late wife's estate. He has been a devoted husband and a father figure to the petitioner. The document in question, the First Amendment to the trust, clearly reflects Marianne's dying wish to provide for her husband. The petitioner, Ms. Patterson, is estranged, unstable, and currently suspended from her job for harassment. She is using this court to act out her grief-induced anger." He gestured to Curtis. Curtis looked down at his hands, humble and hurt. "We have an affidavit from the notary," Golson continued. "The signature is valid. The trust is valid. The request to freeze assets is meritless." Dana stood up. She didn't hitch her pants. She didn't wave her arms. She simply walked to the podium. "Your Honor," Dana said, her voice cool and clear, "we argue that the amendment is a forgery, but rather than argue about handwriting samples, we would like to call Mr. Thomas Harrow to the stand." Golson froze. Curtis stiffened. They hadn't expected us to find the mobile notary so quickly. Mr. Harrow was a small man in a wrinkled jacket who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. He took the oath, his voice trembling. "Mr. Harrow," Dana began, "you notarized the amendment to the Marianne Patterson Trust on October 15th. Is that correct?" "Yes," Harrow said, "and you certified that you witnessed Marianne Patterson sign this document." "Yes, I stamped it." "That is not what I asked," Dana said sharply. "Did you see Marianne Patterson put pen to paper?" Harrow looked at Curtis. Curtis stared straight ahead, his jaw muscle twitching. "It was a mobile appointment," Harrow mumbled. I went to the house. Mr. Vale met me in the driveway. He said his wife was very sick. She was immunocompromised. He didn't want strangers in the house. So you stayed in your car? Yes. And Mr. Vale took the unsigned document inside and came back 5 minutes later with it signed. Yes, Harrow whispered. So you never saw Marianne Patterson? No. You never verified her identity. Mr. Vale had her driver's license. Mr. Harrow, Dana said, leaning in. Do you know the penalty for notarizing a signature you did not witness? It is a felony. It is fraud. I was just trying to be helpful, Harrow blurted out. He said she was dying. No further questions, Dana said. Judge Vance looked at Harrow with eyes that could cut glass. You may step down, Mr. Harrow, and I suggest you do not leave the building. She turned to Golson. The amendment is invalid on its face. The notary did not witness the signature. The document is tossed. Curtis's face went pale. The first brick had just fallen out of his wall. However, Golson stammered, trying to pivot, even if the amendment is technically flawed, Mr. Vale is still the spouse, and we are here about the restraining order. Ms. Patterson is dangerous. We have a witness who saw her attacking the house. Call your witness, the judge said. Greg Polson walked in. He looked more confident than the notary. He was wearing a polo shirt and tried to smile at the judge. Mr. Polson, Golson asked, where were you on the night of the blizzard? I was pulling up to Curtis's house, Greg said. Around 11:50 at night. I saw that woman. He pointed at me. Screaming and kicking the door. She looked crazy, like she was on drugs. Curtis was inside, looking terrified. Did you interact with her? No, I didn't want to get involved. I drove off. Thank you, Golson said. Dana stood up. She was holding a flash drive. Your Honor, permission to play a video file marked Exhibit C. Proceed? The large monitor on the wall flickered to life. It was the footage from the Miller's doorbell camera. The timestamp was clearly visible in the corner. Mr. Polson? Dana said. This is a recording of the street in front of the Vale residence. The time is 11:50 at night. Do you see your truck? Greg squinted at the screen. The street was empty. Just snow in my car. Maybe the clock is wrong, Greg said. The clock is synced to the atomic server, Dana said. Let's fast forward. She scrubbed the video to 12:25 in the morning. A pickup truck pulled into the frame. Is that your truck, Mr. Polson? Yeah. That is 35 minutes after the police arrived, Dana said. You didn't see Ms. Patterson screaming. You saw police lights. You weren't there when the incident happened. You are lying under oath to protect your drinking buddy, aren't you? I might have got the times mixed up, Greg stammered. It was snowing. You swore in an affidavit you were there at 11:50, Dana said. Perjury is not a mix-up. Mr. Polson, it is a crime. Judge Vance slammed her gavel. Mr. Golson, control your witnesses or I will hold you in contempt. Mr. Polson, get out of my courtroom. Greg Polson practically ran for the exit. Curtis didn't look at him. Curtis was staring at the table, his face turning a blotchy red. Your Honor, Dana said. We have established the document is fake. We have established the witness is fake. Now, let's talk about the incident itself. Mr. Vale claims he locked the door automatically and that my client was the aggressor. Dana plugged in a new drive. This was the data I had extracted from SmartGuard. Mr. Vale, Dana said, looking directly at Curtis. You claimed in your police statement that the door locked on its own. Curtis stood up. Golson tried to stop him, but Curtis waved him off. He needed to speak. He needed to charm. It did, Curtis said, his voice smooth but tight. It is a scheduled routine. I set it for safety. Elena knows that. I love that girl like my own daughter. I would never hurt her. I was asleep when she went out. You love her? Dana asked. I do. I promised her mother I would take care of her. Then explain this, Dana said. She put the server log on the screen. The text was large and damning. 234612. Command Global Lockdown. User Curtis. At 11:46, Dana read. 1 minute before Elena called 911, the user Curtis manually engaged the deadlock. You weren't asleep. You were on your phone. You locked her out on purpose. I might have checked the app, Curtis said, sweat beading on his forehead. I saw the door was open. I locked it to be safe. I didn't know she was outside. You didn't know, Dana asked. Then why did you do this? She clicked the next slide. It was a photo of the security camera above the garage, twisted to face the wall. Why blind the camera? Mr. Vale? Dana asked. If you love her, why turn off the eyes that watch over her? The wind moved it, Curtis snapped. It was a blizzard. The wind unscrewed the mounting bracket and rotated it 90 degrees to the left, Dana asked. That is a very specific wind. This is circumstantial, Golson shouted. You have no proof he knew she was there. Actually, Dana said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. We do. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, we have been provided with video evidence from a third party. This footage has been authenticated by Special Agent Lauren Pierce of the United States Treasury Department. At the mention of the Treasury Department, Curtis flinched as if he had been slapped. His head snapped up. His eyes went wide. For the first time, the mask didn't just slip. It shattered. Federal agents, he whispered. Play the video. Judge Vance ordered. The screen changed. It was the black and white night vision footage from the SUV. The courtroom was silent. On the screen, I was pounding on the door. I looked small and terrified. And then, the camera zoomed in. There was Curtis, standing behind the glass. He was holding his drink. He checked his watch. He looked directly at me. He looked at my face, contorted in a scream, and he took a sip of bourbon. Then he reached out and turned off the porch light. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was the silence of people witnessing pure, distilled malice. He wasn't asleep, Dana said quietly. He wasn't afraid. He was waiting. She pointed to the screen where the video showed the dining room table in the background. And look at the table, Your Honor. That is the forged amendment. And that is Marianne Patterson's practice notebook. He was practicing her signature while he waited for her daughter to freeze. Curtis sank back into his chair. He looked small. The charcoal suit suddenly looked too big for him. He wasn't the master of the house anymore. He was just a man who had been caught. Judge Vance stared at the screen for a long time. Then she turned her gaze to Curtis. It was a look of utter disgust. I have seen enough, the judge said. Her voice was low and furious. Mr. Golson, your motion for a restraining order is denied with prejudice. Ms. Klein, your petition is granted in full. She picked up her pen and began writing orders, speaking as she wrote. 1. The Marianne Patterson Trust is immediately frozen. Mr. Curtis Vale is removed as trustee effective this second. I am appointing an independent fiduciary to take control of all assets. 2. Mr. Vale, you are ordered to vacate the residence at 422 Cedar Ridge Lane by 5 o'clock today. You will leave the keys, the garage openers, and all devices. You will take only your clothing and personal toiletries. If you remove a single piece of paper, I will hold you in contempt and jail you. 3. I am referring the transcript of this hearing, specifically the testimony regarding the notary and the video evidence, to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into forgery, perjury, and attempted assault. She looked over her glasses at Curtis. You came into my courtroom claiming to be a protector, Mr. Vale. You are leaving it lucky that I don't have the jurisdiction to arrest you myself right now. Get out of my sight. She slammed the gavel. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Court is adjourned. Dana turned to me and squeezed my hand. We did it. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exhausted. I felt the heavy, draining relief of a survivor who finally reaches the shore. I stood up. Curtis was standing up too. Golson was already packing his briefcase, refusing to look at his client. He knew a sinking ship when he saw one. Curtis looked at me across the aisle. His face was gray. The confident, condescending stepfather was gone. In his place was a man who knew the walls were closing in. He opened his mouth, maybe to say my name, maybe to offer another lie. But he didn't say anything. He saw the look in my eyes. It wasn't fear anymore. It was the look of the compliance officer who had finally closed the audit. He turned and walked toward the double doors. He walked with a hunch, his steps quick and nervous. He pushed through the doors and into the hallway, where the real world and Agent Pierce was waiting. I watched him go. "He looks scared," Dana observed, packing her laptop. "He should be," I said. "He thinks he just lost a house. He doesn't know he's about to lose his freedom." "Ready to go get your keys back?" Dana asked. "No," I said. "I am ready to go change the locks." We walked out of the courtroom. The air in the hallway was cooler than inside. But for the first time in 6 weeks, I didn't feel the chill. I felt the heat of the fire we had just lit under Curtis Vale's life. The night before the final hearing, the snow began to fall again. It was a light dusting this time. Nothing like the blizzard that had nearly claimed my life a week earlier, but it was enough to cover the world in a fresh coat of white silence. I was sitting in my hotel room, organizing the final exhibits with Dana, when my phone rang. It was 3:14 in the morning. It was Agent Pierce. "He cracked," she said. Her voice was devoid of sleep, sharp and alert. "He did exactly what we predicted he would do." "Where is he?" I asked, gripping the phone. "He is currently in the back of a squad car," Pierce said. "About 20 minutes ago, Curtis Vale threw a brick through the back window of Arthur Sterling's storage facility on the edge of town. He didn't go for the cash box. He went straight for the P section of the file cabinets. He was trying to find the original trust documents to burn them." "Did he get them?" "No," Pierce said. "We emptied that cabinet 2 days ago with a warrant. All he found was a silent alarm and my team waiting in the shadows. He has been arrested for breaking and entering and burglary. He is being processed at the county jail right now." "Will he make it to court?" I asked. "Oh, he will make it," Pierce promised. "He made bail an hour ago. He is desperate. Elena. He thinks if he can just get into that courtroom and charm the judge, he can make the civil case go away before the criminal charges stick. He doesn't know about the federal indictment yet. He thinks he is just fighting a trespassing charge and a stepdaughter. Let him come," I said. "I want him to be there when it ends." The next morning, the courtroom was packed. The story of the frozen stepdaughter had circulated through Hollow Creek, fueled by Curtis's media play and the sudden, dramatic turn of the restraining order hearing. Neighbors were there. Former co-workers of my mother were there. Even Mrs. Miller, the neighbor who saved me, was sitting in the back row, clutching her purse. Curtis arrived 3 minutes late. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in a single night. His suit was wrinkled. His eyes were bloodshot and rimmed with dark circles. He walked with a frantic energy, his hands shaking as he poured himself a glass of water at the defense table. Barry Golson sat next to him, looking less like a bulldog and more like a man realizing he was tethered to a sinking anchor. Judge Vance entered. She did not look at Curtis. She looked at the file in front of her. "We are here for the final ruling on the matter of the Patterson estate," she said. "Ms. Klein, you have the floor to summarize the plaintiff's position." Dana stood up. She didn't use notes. She didn't need them. She walked to the center of the room and began to dismantle Curtis Vale's life with surgical precision. "Your Honor," Dana began, "this case is not about a misunderstanding. It is not about grief. It is about a calculated, systematic campaign of erasure." She pointed to the timeline projected on the screen. "First," Dana said, "Mr. Vale erased the financial security of Marianne Patterson. He forged a trust amendment, a fact confirmed by the notary who admitted under oath that he never witnessed the signature. He used this forgery to transfer $45,000 of trust assets into a shell company, Vale Property Services, which we have proven operates out of a virtual mailbox." Curtis flinched. He stared at the table, refusing to look up. "Second," Dana continued, her voice rising slightly, "he erased the safety of the beneficiary, On the night of November 12th, he lured Elena Patterson onto a porch during a blizzard. The server logs from SmartGuard systems prove he manually engaged the deadlock. The video evidence proves he turned off the porch light. He did not act in self-defense. He acted with the intent to cause harm through environmental exposure. And finally, Dana said, turning to look directly at Curtis. When he realized his control was slipping, he tried to erase the evidence. He wiped the data. He lied to the police. And last night, he broke into a law office to destroy the original will. This is not the behavior of a grieving husband. This is the behavior of a criminal trying to bury his sins. Dana sat down. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. Barry Golson stood up half-heartedly. Your Honor, my client he has been under immense stress. The break-in was a moment of confusion. He just wanted to see his wife's handwriting. He loves this family. Sit down. Mr. Golson, Judge Vance said. She didn't even look up from her writing. She scribbled for another minute. Then she raised her head. I am ready to rule, she said. Curtis looked up. There was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. The delusional hope of a narcissist who believes he can charm his way out of gravity. The First Amendment to the Marianne Patterson Trust is hereby declared void ab initio. Judge Vance ruled. It is a forgery. The original trust stands. Elena Patterson is the sole successor trustee and sole beneficiary. Mr. Vale, she said, her voice turning to steel. You are stripped of all fiduciary powers. You are ordered to repay the $45,000 withdrawn from the estate within 30 days, along with statutory interest and the plaintiff's legal fees. Failure to do so will result in immediate contempt proceedings. Curtis slumped. He had lost the money. He had lost the house. But he thought it was over. He thought he could walk out, pay the fine eventually, and start a new scam in a new town. He began to gather his papers, his hands trembling but efficient. We are adjourned, Judge Vance said. One moment, Your Honor. The voice came from the back of the room. It was calm, authoritative, and loud enough to stop everyone in their tracks. Agent Lauren Pierce walked through the double doors. She was not alone. 2 uniformed federal marshals walked behind her. Curtis froze. He looked at Lauren, and then he looked at the marshals. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like gray ash. Who are you? Judge Vance asked, though she clearly recognized the badge hanging from Lauren's belt. Special Agent Lauren Pierce, United States Treasury, Lauren said, walking past the bar. I apologize for the interruption, Your Honor, but I have a warrant here that supersedes this civil proceeding. She handed a document to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. Judge Vance read it. Her eyebrows shot up. This is a federal indictment. Yes, Your Honor, Lauren said, turning to face Curtis. Mr. Curtis Vale is under indictment by the grand jury for 14 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of money laundering, and 1 count of aggravated identity theft related to the Snow Wash scheme and the fraudulent insurance claims processing. The courtroom gasped. The whispers started instantly, a hive of buzzing bees. Curtis stood up, knocking his chair over. No, he stammered. No, that is business. You can't do this here. I can, Lauren said. And I am adding an addendum to the file based on the events of this week. Obstruction of justice and witness tampering. Lauren nodded to the marshals. They moved fast, before Golson could even object. They were on Curtis. They pulled his arms behind his back. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed off the high ceilings. Click, click, click. You have the right to remain silent, one of the marshals recited. Curtis wasn't listening. He was looking around the room. His eyes wild. He looked at the judge. He looked at his lawyer. And then, finally, his gaze landed on me. I was standing at the plaintiff's table. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't crying. I was just watching. Elena, he choked out. He tried to step toward me, but the marshal held him back. Elena, please, tell them. Tell them I took care of you. Tell them I loved your mother. We are family. You can't let them take me. We are family. The room went quiet again. Everyone looked at me. The judge, the neighbors, the agents, they were waiting to see if the stepdaughter would crack. They were waiting to see if the manipulation would work one last time. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had made my mother feel small for years. The man who had turned my home into a prison of spreadsheets and silence. The man who had stood behind a glass door and watched me freeze, checking his watch like he was timing a boiled egg. I walked out from behind the table. I stopped 3 feet from him. "You are mistaken, Curtis," I said. My voice was low, steady, and carried to every corner of the room. Family does not steal from the dying, family does not forge signatures, and family does not lock each other out in the snow to freeze to death. Curtis opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked at me and saw the truth. I wasn't the impulsive girl anymore. I wasn't the emotional stepchild. I was the wall he had crashed into. "Get him out of here," I said to the marshals. They dragged him away. He didn't fight. He went limp, a broken puppet whose strings had finally been cut. As the doors swung shut behind him, the crowd in the courtroom let out a collective breath. It was over. I walked out of the courthouse 10 minutes later. Dana offered to drive me, but I told her I needed a moment. I stepped out onto the wide stone steps. The snow was falling harder now. Large, soft flakes drifted down from a gray sky, coating the city in white. A week ago, this snow had been my enemy. It had been a weapon used to try and erase me. I had feared it. I had hated it. But now, as I stood there, I tipped my face up to the sky. I let the cold flakes land on my cheeks. They didn't burn anymore. They just melted. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a set of keys. They were the keys to 422 Cedar Ridge Lane, the real keys, the physical keys to the new deadbolts I had installed that morning. There were no smart hubs connected to them, no servers, no admin rights that could be revoked by a man with a god complex. They were just heavy, jagged pieces of brass. I closed my fist around them. The metal was cold, but my hand was warm. I took a deep breath of the sharp winter air. It tasted like freedom. I didn't need Curtis Vale to be loved. I didn't need him to be forgiven. I just needed him to never, ever have the keys to my life again. I walked down the steps and into the snow, leaving no footprints for him to follow, because where I was going, he could never go. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed seeing justice served as much as I enjoyed writing it. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or maybe tucked in safe and warm at home? Let me know in the comments below. Let's get a conversation going. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story get recommended to more people. Your support means the world to me. Stay safe, stay warm, and remember, always check your locks. Goodbye for now.